Hi everyone, welcome. In this video we are going to build this image gallery. When I hover over any of these images, you'll see a border around it, and when I move the cursor around, it goes in the same direction. You see it works for all these images in the gallery. And when I click on any of these images, you see it opens in a larger size. So you can see it in the preview mode, and the background color beside it, around it, keeps changing, and you can see the background color is changing constantly. And there is a little close icon here, and when I click on it, it exits the preview mode, and I can click on any image and it opens in a preview mode and close it with a little close icon here. So as you can see, this gallery is looking very beautiful, but the purpose of this video is not to create the most beautiful image gallery out there on YouTube or any other place, but to create a tutorial that's of value to the one watching it. A tutorial that is helpful to the beginner or intermediate JavaScript developer. So as much as possible, I've incorporated some important concepts in this project that I think are of value to a beginner or an intermediate JavaScript developer, such as CSS animation, for loop in JavaScript, the DOM traversal, event listener, arrow function. So overall, in my opinion, this is one of the best tutorials out there to get a beginner or an intermediate JavaScript developer going. So enough of that, let's get started. Here on my desktop, I have this folder that I named Gallery Demo. In this Gallery Demo folder, I have one index.html, style.css, and script.js file, and one images folder with some images that I'll be using in this tutorial. So I'll open this Gallery Demo folder with my code editor, which is Visual Studio Code. So here in the Visual Studio Code, you can see the images folder, the index.html, style.css, and script.js. If you have any problem setting up this, I recommend you check out my beginner's guide to Visual Studio Code, linked in the description. So now let's head over to the index.html file and create the basic HTML boilerplate. So type exclamation and hit tab, and change the title to whatever you want to call it. I'll call it gallery. And after the title, we want to link the HTML file to the CSS. So type link the href to style.css, or whatever you name the CSS file. CSS. So in the body, after the closing body tag, we want to link the HTML to the JS file that we created. So type script, type src, and set the source to the JavaScript file. And in the body tag, we want to create a div and give it a class container. And now let's style this container div in the CSS. Now in the CSS, I want to define some basic styling for the entire document. I've given margin 0, padding 0, and set box size into border box. This default styling for the entire document helps us to style in the CSS with ease. So now let's style the actual container. Remember, it's a class, so we select with the dot notation. Give it a width 100%. Mean height 100 VH. Display flex. Align item center. Justify content center. Background color black. So now let's run this and see what we have. We have this black web page with absolutely nothing on it, so let's fix the HTML. In the container, create another div with the class gallery container. In this gallery container, create another div with the class img box. In this img box, set an img tag and set the src to the first image you want to use in the gallery. Image1.jpg. You can remove the alt text and give it a class of image. Now copy this img box div with the image and paste 2 more times. Now let's run this and see what we have. Now you can see we have this image repeating 3 times, and the size is very large than what we want. So let's start this in the CSS. So now select the gallery container. It's a class, so with the dot notation. Give it a width 90%. Background color transparent. Display grid. Grid template columns. Grid template columns. Repeat auto fit min max 300 pixels 1FR. Now the meaning of this is this. The repeat auto fit means the elements of this gallery container will repeat the number of times possible to fill the browser window. And the min-max property tells how large or smaller the elements of this gallery container can become given the browser window size. The smallest it can get to is 300 pixels and the wider it can get to is 1FR, which is any available space. A gap of 10 pixels and margin top 20 pixels. Margin bottom 20 pixels. Now let's start the IMG box div. Give it a width of 100%. Now let's start the images inside the IMG box. So copy this class and paste. Now IMG. Width 100%. Height 100%. So now let's run this and see what we have. Now we have this. You can see the images are too large. It means there is a problem somewhere with my code. And here in the HTML, be sure to spell this correctly. And let's save this and see what we have. Now we have this and you can see it's arranged very well the way we want it. So now let's add more images to this. Here in the HTML, copy one of these IMG box div and paste 9 more times so that we have a total of 12. And change the various image file paths so that we have all the images you want to use in the project. So I'll forward this place and be back when I'm done. And now when we run this, now we have this and you can see this is looking very nice and well arranged the way we want it to. But now we don't have the hover effect that we'll see a border around it whenever we take cursor over any of them. So let's add that in the CSS. Here in the CSS, after the IMG box class, we want to select it again. So you can copy it and paste :hover. When we hover over it, what do we want? We want a border around it. So border 5 pixels solid and the color is white. But we want this to happen every 3 seconds. We don't want it to appear just like that. We want it to transition 3 seconds. So in the IMG box container, let's add this in transition. And this defaults to all since we haven't stated anything. 0.3 seconds and it is in and out. So let's run this and see what we have. Now you can see when I hover over each of them, the border comes around it and it takes 0.3 seconds to form around it. So this is working exactly what we want. And here we also want the cursor to change into a pointer whenever we hover over this thing. So let's set that in the CSS. So in the IMG box, set cursor pointer. And when we save this and head over to the distance, we see that the cursor changes into a hand kind of thing. So that's what we're looking for. So now let's design the preview side of the image gallery so that when we click anything, it appears in a larger size. So let's add that in the HTML. Here, after the opening container div, we want to create another div with the class full image display. In this div, create another div with the class close div. And in this div, we'll link an image tag, img, and this will be the close icon. And I'll remove the alt text. After this div, we'll create another div with the class full image box. And in this, we'll link an image too. Set the source to one of the images in the gallery. You can remove the alt text. So now let's start this preview section in the CSS. Now select the full image display. Give it a width of 100%, height 100 VH, display flex, align items center, justify content center, position fixed, top 0, border 5 pixels solid, the color is white. Let's give the container class a position of relative. Now let's give this one a z-index of 100. What this z-index does is that it gives precedence to the elements on which one gets shown. Example, when two elements are lying on each other, the one with the higher z-index gets shown, irrespective of whether it's behind the other one or not. So that's z-index. Now let's start the full image box inside the full image display. So select that. Give it a width of 90%, height of 90%. Border 5 pixels solid and the color is orange. So now let's start the image inside the full image box. So select the full image box and the image. Give it a width 100%, height 100%. Now let's start the close div. Give it an absolute position, top 5%, right 5%, padding 10 pixels, cursor pointer. Width 40 pixels, height 40 pixels, background transparent. Display flex, align items center, justify content center. Background color, this RGB color, border 5 pixels solid, the color is orange. Now let's size the image, the close icon inside this close div. So copy this. Now select ING. Give it a width of 25 pixels. Now let's run this and see what we have. We have this, and it seems something is wrong with my code. Here I have to spell close very well, so be sure to spell it well too. Now when we save this, how you can see we have this and everything is working very fine. Now let's set the animated background over here so that the colors will keep changing behind it rather than seeing the image color behind it. So let's change that in the CSS. So here in the CSS, remember the CSS animation we talked about from the beginning? We are implementing it here. So in this class, full image display, we want to give the name to the animation. So animation name, we want to call it change color. Set animation duration to 10 seconds. And set animation iteration count to infinite. So after this class, let's define the animation. So we use this property at keyframes. Then state the name of the animation. Be sure to spell it the same way because it's case sensitive. Now in the keyframes, let's set the various stages for the animation. So at 0%, we want the background color to be something. So you can choose any color of your choice. So copy this and paste 4 more times. And change the stages. So let's say 20%. Paste it again for 100. So set the colors for the various stages of your choice, but be sure that the color at 0% is the same as the color at 100%. And once you are done, let's run the code and see what we have. Now we have this, and you can see the background color keeps changing. But the close icon here doesn't work, and we also don't want this preview mode to appear by default. So let's set the display from flex to none for it, and also set the JavaScript for the close icon so that we can actually press it to close the preview. So here in the CSS, you want to locate this div with the class full image display. We set the display to flex, so change it to none. And when we save this, you'll see that it disappears. And we also want to set the JavaScript for this element so that when we click it, it appears in the preview mode. So now let's head over to the JavaScript to actually add the functionalities for this page. Yeah, so folks, we finally made it and we are here in the JavaScript. So the first thing we want to do is to select some HTML elements. And the first HTML element we want to select is the full image display, also the close div. We also want to select this image, but we haven't given it any class, so let's give it a class. We'll call it display image. And we'll also select the gallery container and also the images inside the gallery container. So let's do that in the JavaScript. So first, let's select the gallery container. So we've selected the gallery container. So we'll set it to gallery container, cause document or query selector, and we select the class with a dot. Since it's a class, we select with a dot because we are using query selector. I think I have to minimize this a little. Okay. Now let's select the full image display. Now let's select the close div. Now let's select the display image. Now let's select all the images inside the gallery. And with this, we'll use class selector. We'll call it gallery images. And here, since we are selecting with class, we don't have to add any dot. But these ones with the query selector, be sure to add dots for all the classes. Because if it were an ID, we would have selected with a hashtag. But since it's a class, we'll select with a dot. And also take notice of how I name the variables. In camel case notations, we start every word with a capital letter. It's not a requirement, but it's a good practice. And also in the HTML, we separate each word by a hyphen. So take note of it, and let's spell this close correctly. And also for the gallery images, we could use query selector all, and it does the same thing as the class name, but just to diversify our knowledge on the DOM traversal. So the next thing we want to do is to select all the images in the gallery and set event listener on them. So remember, that's what we selected with the class over here, images. So we loop through all of them, and for that we use a for loop. And remember some of the important concepts that we mentioned from the beginning that we'll be using in this video. So let's loop through the image gallery. So for. So we start the iteration at index of 0 and continue this iteration as long as the index is less than the length of the gallery images. You remember we have 12 of them. And after every iteration, we increment I by 1. Now we want to select all the images in the gallery and set a click event on them so that anyone that gets clicked respond to this event and the function will define for it. So let's select the images in the gallery. So we select the gallery images at any index at all and add event listener to it. So .add event listener. The type of event we want to listen to is when the user clicks. So click in quotes and a comma. After that, we want to call a function. What do we want to happen when the person clicks on it? And here we'll use an arrow function. Remember what we said from the beginning? And it takes a parameter event. You can call it anything, but let's call it event. The first thing that won't happen whenever someone clicks on any of the image is to set the display property of this full image display to flex. You know, in the CSS we set the display property to none. So we'll change it to flex. So we'll take display, full image display, dot style, dot display. We'll set it to equal to, in quotes, flex. So now let's run this to see if it works. Now when I click anything, it doesn't work. So it means there is a problem somewhere. And over here, we select it, we give the name of this class to images instead of image. So now let's run it and see what we have. Now we have this, and you can see whenever I click something, it opens in the preview mode. So the code is working the way we want. And the next thing we want to do is whenever the image is open in the preview mode, we don't want to see the gallery container. Even though we set the Z index to a higher value, anything can happen. So let's set the display property of this element to none. So gallery container. Now let's save this and see. And you'll see apparently no change. But anytime I click any image at all, it's only this image, the first image that gets displayed. So let me click this one, and you see this image over here. This is not what I clicked. So we want to let the image that is clicked be displayed over here in the preview. So let's set that in the JavaScript. So that element is the display image we have over here. So we'll let the display image .src, the source of it, be equal to event.target.src. The event.target is the element that gets clicked at any point in time. So any element that gets clicked, we want to set the src to this one. So now let's run it to see if it works. Now you can see that when I click this white image, it actually displays here. And when I click this mountainous image, it also displays here. So this is working how we want it. So now we want to be able to click out of here to make the close icon work. Now it's not working. When I click it, nothing happens. So we want to be able to close from here whenever we click this. So let's take care of that in the JavaScript. And now for the code to close out of the preview mode is fairly straightforward. And for that, let's take the close icon and add event listener to it. A click event. When we click it, we want to execute this function. This one takes no parameter. So now when we click on the close icon, we want to take the display a full image display and set the display property to none instead of flex. So let's run this and see if everything works. Now when I click on this, it opens the preview. And when I click on the close icon, you see the place becomes so dark. We can't see anything, but at least the preview is off. This is because here in the JavaScript, we said that when an image is open in the preview, we take the gallery container and set the display to none. So whenever we close from the preview image, the place will become dark. So we have to set the display back to what it was previously before we open the preview. So we'll set the gallery container, display should be equal to grid. So now let's test this and see if it works. Now you can see we have this. When I click any of it, it opens in the preview. When I press the close icon, now we get back to the grid items. And it works for all these images, and everything is working the way we planned from the beginning. When I move cursor over this, you see the border around it, and I open each of them, and it opens in the preview. I close it from there, and we have everything working the way we intended it to. So in this video, we've gone through some important concepts like CSS grid, CSS animation, JavaScript for loop, the DOM traversal, we use query selector, we use the class selector, we use event listener, arrow function. Yeah, so folks, this is basically how we've come to the conclusion of this video, how we build this image gallery using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. If you find any value in this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you like contents like this. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comment section below. And if you learned something new, good to know. And if you already know all that have been covered in this video, it's good to enlighten an already existing knowledge. Whichever way, thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one. Here are some other cool tutorials on my channel. Feel free to check them out.